Hey guys, tonight we are slipping back through time, leaving our warm, quiet rooms behind to find ourselves within the cold, imposing walls of a medieval castle. Picture it, towering stone walls, grand feasts in a smoky hall, knights in shining armor. It's the stuff of fairy tales. But as you'll soon discover, the reality was a little less glamorous and a lot more fragrant. The simple truth is, without your heated blanket, insulated windows, and morning coffee, you probably wouldn't survive a week. But survival isn't the goal tonight. Sleep is. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and post your location and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the cold. It's not the crisp, clean cold of a modern winter morning. This is a deep, damp, and ancient cold that seems to radiate from the very stones themselves. It's a cold that has settled into the marrow of the castle over centuries, and it's the first thing to greet you as you drift up from the depths of sleep. There is no alarm clock, no gentle chime from your phone. Your waking is prompted by a subtle shift in the darkness. A sliver of watery gray light has begun to push through a high, narrow slit of the window, a window that serves more as a defensive arrow slit than a source of pleasant morning sun. You are lying on your back, and for a moment, you just listen. The silence of the night is giving way to the first stirrings of the day. From far below, you can hear the faint, rhythmic clang of the castle blacksmith already at his forge. A rooster, oblivious to its own cliché, crows with gusto from the inner bailey. Somewhere outside your chamber, you hear the shuffle of leather-soled shoes on stone and the muffled murmur of voices, the guards changing shifts on the battlements. You pull a heavy fur blanket tighter around you, the rough texture scratching softly against your chin. You're in what could be considered a luxury suite for the 13th century. It's a four-poster bed, a monstrous wooden structure that dominates the small stone room. Heavy curtains of thick, dark wool hang on all four sides. At night, you draw them shut, creating a small, stuffy tent of captured body heat. This is your only real defense against the oppressive chill of the chamber, a room within a room. It's a clever bit of engineering, really. A personal, fabric-based heating system powered entirely by you. The mattress beneath you is a strange landscape of lumps and valleys. It's essentially a giant sack, a textile bag densely stuffed with whatever was available. If you're lucky, it's filled with feathers, maybe from the geese in the castle yard. But it could just as easily be straw, wool, or even horsehair. Every few weeks, it has to be taken out, beaten senseless, and restuffed to prevent it from becoming a single, monolithic lump of discomfort. You make a mental note to have the servant see to that later today. Historians still argue whether the concept of privacy as we know it even existed in the medieval household, or if life was lived in a state of constant, accepted publicness. Your next experience is a point in favor of the latter. Without so much as a polite cough, the heavy oak door to your chamber swings inward on groaning iron hinges. A young servant, a boy of maybe 15, enters carrying a steaming wooden bucket in one hand and a ceramic ewer in the other. He doesn't look at you, keeping his eyes respectfully lowered as he moves to a small wooden stand in the corner. He pours water from the ewer into a wide, shallow basin. The steam rising from it is a small miracle, a sign that someone in the kitchens was awake even earlier than the blacksmith. Hot water is a luxury that requires planning, wood, and effort. It is not to be wasted. The boy silently lays out your clothes on a large wooden chest at the foot of your bed. This chest holds your entire wardrobe. It's beautifully carved, but its primary function is practical, keeping the mice from nesting in your tunics. You finally push aside the heavy bed curtains, and the full force of the room's cold hits you. The air smells of damp stone, wood smoke, and something else. Something faintly herbal. You look down at the floor. It isn't bare stone. It's covered in a thick layer of rushes, dried reeds that provide a bit of insulation and a slightly softer surface to walk on. Sprinkled among the rushes are dry herbs, meadowsweet and lavender, most likely. It's a primitive form of air freshener, meant to combat the general funk of medieval life. A valiant, if often losing, battle. You swing your legs out of bed, your bare feet hitting the rush-covered floor. You pad over to the washstand. The water in the basin is already cooling, but its relative warmth is a welcome shock to your skin. You splash your face, scrub your hands, and that's about it for your morning ablutions. A full bath is a major event, an undertaking for a different day. For now, This is all the refreshment you'll get. Now, for the lengthy process of getting dressed. You start with the base layer, a long linen shirt, or chemise, that falls to your knees. It's your underwear, your pajamas, and your main defense against the scratchy wool that's about to come. Linen is soft, but it's clammy in the damp air. Over this, you pull on your hose, which are essentially two separate woolen leggings, one for each leg. You tie them with leather garters to a belt around your waist. It feels a bit like assembling yourself every morning. Finally comes the main garment, a heavy tunic, or coat, made of thick wool dyed a deep russet color. It's belted at the waist, and you let the fabric blouse over the belt slightly. You slip your feet into simple leather turn shoes, which feel more like soft slippers than structured footwear. The entire ensemble is heavy, practical, and designed for warmth above all else. Comfort, as we understand it, was not the primary goal of medieval fashion. A key historical fact to remember is that a castle was first and foremost a military fortress. Every design choice you see around you is dictated by defense, not domestic bliss. Those narrow, spiraling staircases? They almost always spiral clockwise, designed to give a right-handed swordsman defending from above the advantage over an attacker climbing up. The small windows, the thick walls, the staggered gates, all of it is meant to make the castle an incredibly difficult place to assault, which, by extension, makes it a rather dark, drafty, and difficult place to live. As you stand fully dressed, you notice the servant has also brought a small piece of dark bread and a clay mug of weak, watered-down ale. This is your pre-breakfast, a little something to get the day started. The ale is safer than the water, which could be teeming with invisible dangers, and it provides a few welcome calories. You chew the dense, chewy bread slowly, staring at the tapestry hanging on the wall opposite your bed. It depicts a hunt, full of faded green trees and indigo-clad nobles on horseback. It's not just for decoration, it's another layer of insulation, a large, woven shield against the relentless cold of the stone. You might wonder about the finer details of morning routines, the most intimate of which was handled with the help of servants, especially for the nobility. The famous groom of the stool was a highly trusted courtier in the Tudor era who assisted the monarch with their toilet. This position, while sounding odd to us, was one of great influence, as it granted unfettered and private access to the king. In your 13th century castle, the Lord's Chamberlain would have a similarly close and trusted role, reminding us that our modern notions of privacy in the bathroom are just that, modern. Your small meal finished, you are ready to begin the day. The servant has already disappeared as silently as he arrived. You take one last look around your chamber, this small stone box that serves as your personal sanctuary within the larger fortress. You pull back the heavy bolt on the door and step out into the corridor, which is somehow even colder and darker than your room. The day awaits, with its duties, its politics, and its constant, grinding routines. Your first destination is the Great Hall, where the castle will truly begin to come to life. The corridor is a tunnel of gray stone, even colder than your chamber now that you've left the small pocket of warmth generated by your own breathing. The air is still and heavy. You walk with your arms crossed, hands tucked into your armpits for warmth. Your soft leather shoes make barely a sound on the uneven flagstones, but the space is far from silent. Every sound is amplified, echoing along the stone artery of the castle. You hear the distant clatter of a dropped pot from the kitchens, the sharp bark of a dog in the courtyard, and the low, continuous murmur of the 100 or so souls who are beginning to move about this vertical stone village. The only light comes from the occasional torch sputtering in a wall-mounted iron bracket. Its flickering flame throws long, dancing shadows that make the corridor seem alive, and it does little to fight off the chill, succeeding only in adding the smell of burning pitch to the damp, stony air. As you continue, the low murmur you've been hearing grows into a dull roar, the sound of 100 conversations happening at once, all bouncing off stone and high timber. The smell changes, too. The clean scent of stone and damp is being overpowered by something much more complex: wood smoke, roasting meat, unwashed bodies, wet dogs, and stale ale. You have arrived at the Great Hall, the undeniable heart of the castle. You push through a heavy curtain that serves as a door and the full sensory assault hits you. The hall is a vast, cavernous space. The ceiling is a cathedral of dark wood, beams as thick as tree trunks crisscrossing high above you, disappearing into a smoky gloom. There is no grand fireplace built into the wall. Instead, a massive, square fire pit dominates the center of the hall. A great log fire crackles and spits within it, its smoke and heat rising in a visible column towards a louvered vent in the roof, a glorified hole designed to let the smoke out. Inevitably, It fails to do a perfect job, and a permanent, hazy layer of smoke hangs in the upper reaches of the hall, making your eyes water slightly. The hall is already teeming with life. This single room serves as the castle's dining room, throne room, courtroom, and general meeting place. It is a perfect, living diagram of the medieval social order. At the far end of the room, on a raised wooden platform called a dais, is the high table. This is where the lord and his family sit, along with any high-ranking guests. Their chairs are more ornate, perhaps with arms and carved backs, and a clean linen tablecloth drapes their table. They get the best view, the best food, and, most importantly, they are furthest from the drafts of the main entrance and closest to a secondary fireplace that might be built into the side wall. Stretching down the length of the hall from the dais are two long, rough-hewn trestle tables, flanked by simple backless benches. Here sits everyone else, arranged in a brutally clear hierarchy. The closer you are to the high table, the higher your status. The knights, the steward, the constable, and other important officials sit above the salt, a large, often ornate salt cellar placed in the middle of the table that acted as a social dividing line. Below it sit the lesser-ranking men-at-arms, the skilled craftsmen like the fletcher and the armorer, and finally, at the far end closest to the door, the lowest-ranking servants. Your own position on these benches is a clear, daily reminder of your exact place in this world. Medieval social climbing wasn't just a metaphor, it was a literal attempt to get a seat a few feet closer to the warmth and the good bread. You find your designated spot and swing a leg over the bench. The surface of the table is dark wood, scarred with the knife marks of 1,000 previous meals. There is no plate. At your place sits a thick, square slab of dark, stale bread. This is your trencher, a plate you can eat. You also have a wooden spoon for any soupy dishes and a knife that you've brought yourself, tucked into your belt. A single drinking cup, probably made of wood or horn, is placed between you and your two neighbors. You'll be sharing. Servants, young squires eager to please the knights they serve, move briskly up and down the aisles, bearing platters of food and heavy pitchers of ale. The morning meal is simple and quick. It's called breakfast for a reason. You are literally breaking your fast from the night before. Platters of bread are set down on the table. The bread, like the seating, is a status symbol. At the high table, they eat manchet, a fine, fluffy white bread made from sifted wheat flour. As the platters move down the tables, the bread gets progressively darker and denser, ending with the coarse barley and rye bread being served at your end. It's tough and requires serious chewing, but it's filling. A large clay pot of pottage is also passed around. This is the staple food of the masses. Historians debate the exact daily composition of pottage, but it was likely a catch-all dish, an ever-simmering stew where leftovers from last night's meal would be added to a base of boiled grains, vegetables like onions and peas, and whatever herbs were on hand. Today, you can taste leeks and perhaps a hint of bacon fat. You use your spoon to ladle a messy portion onto your bread trencher, the thick stew soaking into it almost immediately. The hall is loud. People are talking, laughing, and arguing. A group of hounds, the lord's hunting dogs, roam freely under the tables, a welcome and officially sanctioned clean-up crew, eagerly waiting for any dropped scrap or bone. There is no pretense of quiet dignity at this end of the hall. You eat with your hands and your knife, tearing off chunks of your stew-soaked trencher. You drink deeply from the shared cup when it's passed to you. The ale is weak and slightly sour, but it's caloric and, critically, much safer to drink than most water sources. Despite the chaos, there are rules of etiquette. You don't put your elbows on the table. You don't speak with your mouth full. You use your knife only for cutting your own food, not for spearing morsels from the communal dish. These small civilities are all that separate you from pure barbarism, or so the castle priest is fond of saying. The meal ends as abruptly as it began. There is no lingering over coffee. People eat their fill, wipe their hands on their tunics or on the nearest dog, and get up to begin their day's work. The trestle tables are designed to be easily dismantled and cleared away, transforming the dining hall into a space for ducal court, weapon repairs, or even indoor archery practice on a rainy day. This multifunctionality is the key to understanding the Great Hall. It was the castle's engine room, constantly changing its purpose to suit the needs of the day. You have eaten your fill. The pottage was warm, the ale has taken the edge off the morning chill, and your bread plate is gone, consumed along with its contents. You rise from the bench, giving your neighbor a nod. The Great Hall is already transforming, the servants stacking benches against the wall. You are just one small part of this great, noisy, living machine, and your own duties await. Leaving the echoing clamor of the Great Hall behind, You feel a distinct shift in the castle's atmosphere. You follow a narrow, spiraling staircase, the same kind you know was designed to impede attackers, but this one is cleaner, the stone less worn. Each upward step takes you further from the public, boisterous, and overwhelmingly masculine world of the hall and into the private, more refined domain of the castle's elite. The air grows stiller, the light a little brighter. You arrive before a heavy oak door, this one bound with more ornate ironwork and featuring a proper handle instead of a simple latch. This door leads to the solar. The moment you step inside, the contrast is palpable. While the ever-present stone chill remains, it's beaten back by a roaring fire in a proper, wall-embedded fireplace, complete with a chimney that draws the smoke away efficiently. The air is clear, scented with beeswax from a pair of slowly burning candles and the faint, dry perfume of herbs. Most striking of all is the light. The main window is large, far larger than any arrow slit, and paned with actual glass. It's a stunning display of wealth. The small, cloudy, uneven panes are held together by a lead lattice, but they allow a wash of clear, uninterrupted morning light to flood the room, a luxury more precious than gold. This is the solar, the private living quarters of the lord and his family, but more than that, it is the office and nerve center of the lady of the castle. You see her seated near the window to make the most of the light. She is not idle, nor is she engaged in frivolous pursuits. Before her is a small, slanted writing desk, and she is deep in conversation with the castle steward, a grim-faced man who holds a ledger book in his hands. He points to a line of figures, murmuring about the price of oats, and she listens intently, her expression thoughtful. She is the chatelaine, the lady of the castle. And if you thought her life was one of leisurely embroidery and sighing romantically from balconies, you would be profoundly mistaken. A mainstream historical fact, often overlooked in fairy tales, is that a noblewoman was a powerful and essential administrator. When her husband was away, which was often, due to wars, political duties, or tournaments, the entire command of the castle, from its defense to its economic survival, fell to her. She was the CEO, and this solar was her boardroom. Her duties done with the steward, she dismisses him with a nod. He bows and retreats, and you see her turn and select a key from a large iron ring at her waist. She unlocks a small, iron-bound chest on a nearby table. This is the spice chest, and its contents are worth a fortune. The castle cook now stands in the doorway, waiting respectfully. She asks him about the preparations for the upcoming feast day, and he details his plans. She listens, then uses a tiny spoon to measure out a small pile of black peppercorns, a few cloves, and a single, precious nutmeg seed. She carefully wraps them in a piece of cloth and hands them to the cook. His face lights up. This single transaction is a display of immense wealth and her absolute control over the castle's resources. That little bundle of dried seeds is worth more than the cook will earn in a year. This was her budget meeting. Around the room, several other women are seated on cushioned stools. These are her ladies-in-waiting. They are not merely companions. They are the daughters of other noble families, sent here to receive a practical education in running a high-status household. Under the lady's watchful eye, they are learning everything she knows. Right now, they are working together on a massive tapestry stretched across a wooden frame. Their needles flash in and out of the fabric, creating a scene of heroic battle. This is not just a hobby, it's a valuable form of storytelling and wealth creation. A well-made tapestry was a portable asset, an investment that could decorate a cold stone wall and be rolled up and transported to another castle if need be. The lady now turns her attention to a stack of parchment. Historians debate the exact extent of female literacy in the Middle Ages, but for a high-status woman responsible for a sprawling estate, the ability to read and understand accounts and correspondence was a near-essential skill. She scans a letter, her lips moving slightly, then calls over one of her ladies. She begins to dictate a reply, her words measured and political. It's a letter to a neighboring baron, delicately declining his offer of a marriage alliance for her eldest son without causing offense. It's a masterclass in diplomacy, a reminder that the politics of the realm were built on a foundation of these personal, carefully managed relationships. If the lord fought the wars with a sword, she fought them with a quill. She could probably use a medieval version of a spreadsheet to keep it all straight. Her work is interrupted by a soft cry. A nursemaid enters, carrying the lady's youngest child, a small girl of 3 who is flushed with a fever. The lady's demeanor changes instantly from one of a stern manager to that of a concerned mother. She takes the child, feels her forehead, and speaks to her in a soft, reassuring voice. She then moves to another chest, this one filled with dried herbs. She is the castle's primary physician. She knows her remedies, passed down through generations. She selects a handful of dried chamomile and yarrow, crushing them in a small mortar and pestle before instructing the nursemaid to steep them in hot water. She directs another lady-in-waiting to prepare a cool cloth for the child's head. There is no panic, only calm, practiced competence. This is the rhythm of her life, a constant, seamless shift between manager, politician, accountant, artist, and doctor. She is the stable point around which the entire domestic and economic world of the castle revolves. She is responsible for the health of every soul within the walls, the management of its supplies, the education of its children, and the preservation of its wealth and status. She is the guardian of its future. As the morning wears on, the administrative tasks subside. She sits with her ladies, taking up a needle herself to add a few stitches to the tapestry, her movements graceful and economical. The conversation is quiet, a mix of household instruction and shared news. You are in a bubble of relative peace, a stark contrast to the noise and grime of the hall below. This is a world of quiet, immense responsibility, a world run by women, for the survival of everyone. It's a side of castle life that is often forgotten, but without the quiet, relentless work done in this sunlit room, the entire fortress would crumble from within. You leave the serene, sunlit world of the solar behind. The descent feels like a journey not just down, but backward, away from the refined and into the primal. You navigate a series of starkly functional staircases and drafty corridors, the stone walls now completely bare, the air growing heavier and thicker with every step. The distant, refined sounds of the ladies' chambers fade, replaced by a growing, rhythmic cacophony, a frantic chopping, the clang of metal on metal, and a chorus of rough shouts. You are heading for the kitchens, and you can feel their heat and smell their work long before you see them. Most castle kitchens, as a crucial historical fact, were housed in a separate or semi-detached building within the bailey. The reason was simple and grim: fire. A kitchen fire was a constant threat, and the last thing any lord wanted was for an overturned pot of hot fat to burn his entire fortress to the ground. You step from a covered walkway into the kitchen building, and the change is instantaneous and overwhelming. A blast of heat, thick with the smells of roasting meat, boiling vegetables, baking bread, sweat, and smoke, hits you like a physical blow. The room is a vast, stone-built cavern of controlled chaos. The ceiling is high and blackened with centuries of soot. There isn't one fireplace, but several enormous hearths lining the walls, each large enough for a person to stand inside. Over one, a cauldron the size of a small boat hangs from a thick iron chain, its contents bubbling and steaming with a familiar, thick aroma of pottage for the lower-ranking staff. Another hearth is dedicated to roasting, where two young boys, their faces streaked with soot and sweat, miserably turn the handles of a long iron spit. A whole pig, its skin already crackling and golden, rotates slowly over the glowing embers. Their job is to never, ever stop turning until the meat is cooked through, a medieval gym routine with the worst possible motivation. In the center of this culinary workshop is the master cook. He is not a humble servant stirring a pot. He is the Magister Coquorum, a respected, well-paid, and notoriously temperamental artist. He stands, hands on his wide hips, a long-handled spoon tucked into his belt like a weapon. He bellows an order at a boy who isn't chopping onions fast enough, then strides over to a bubbling pot to taste a sauce, dipping a finger in with no hesitation before pronouncing it needs more verjuice. He is the conductor of this greasy, frantic orchestra, and the entire kitchen moves to his rhythm. He commands a small army. There are undercooks furiously chopping vegetables on thick wooden tables, their knives a constant, percussive rhythm. There are the pot boys, wrestling with heavy iron and copper pots. In a corner, near a large stone trough filled with murky water, are the scullions. Theirs is the lowest job, scrubbing the endless tide of greasy pots and wooden platters with sand and rough cloths, their hands raw and chapped. And near a set of massive, dome-shaped brick ovens, the baker and his assistants are sliding loaves of bread in and out with long wooden paddles, creating the very same loaves, from the fine white manchette to the coarse dark trencher bread you saw in the hall, that so perfectly represent the castle's social strata. But this isn't just about brute force cooking. There is a surprising level of sophistication here, a flair for the dramatic. On one table, a cook is carefully molding a mixture of ground meat and breadcrumbs into the shape of a sleeping lamb for the high table. These creations were known as subtleties or subtleties, edible sculptures designed to impress and entertain guests during a feast. They were pure culinary theater. Speaking of theater, you witness the preparation of a truly bizarre and wonderful dish. A quirky tidbit of medieval gastronomy come to life. A cook takes a massive, pre-baked pastry shell, known as a coffin, which is already cooked and cooled. Another brings over a cage full of live starlings. With a mischievous grin, the cook carefully places the fluttering, confused birds inside the hollow pie crust and deftly seals the top with another piece of pastry. The pie won't be cooked again. Instead, it will be presented at the high table, and when the Lord cuts into it, the birds will burst out and fly around the rafters of the great hall, to the delight and astonishment of the guests. It's the medieval equivalent of a surprise party, a 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie spectacle made real. Of course, with all this food, a natural question arises: who gets to eat what? While the Lord dines on swan and venison, the kitchen staff are supposed to stick to their rations of pottage and dark bread. But historians and food archaeologists debate how strictly the sumptuary laws, which dictated who could wear or eat certain things, were actually enforced within a castle's walls. As you watch a cook deftly slice a piece of sizzling pork from the roast, supposedly to check if it is cooked, and pop it into his mouth, you suspect that proximity to the food had its perks. The whole operation is a dance of astonishing coordination, a medieval version of a Michelin star kitchen during the dinner rush. Finished dishes are assembled on great wooden or pewter platters, ready to be paraded by a procession of servants to the great hall for the midday meal. The boar's head, now fully cooked and decorated with gilded tusks, is placed on a bed of herbs. Pies or glazed sauces are poured into yours. You take a step back, suddenly aware of the floor beneath your feet, slick with grease, water, and dropped bits of food. The dogs you saw in the great hall are here too, a welcome part of the sanitation crew, snapping up anything that falls. It's a world away from the ladies' solar, with its clean floors and beeswax candles. This is the castle's engine room, hot, loud, filthy, and absolutely vital. Without the relentless, sweltering labor performed in this fiery heart, the castle, with all its knights and ladies, would starve. You back away from the oppressive heat of the kitchens and step out into the wide, open air of the outer bailey. The change is immediate. The air, while not exactly fresh, it carries the earthy scent of horse, hay, and dust, is at least cool and moving. You take a deep breath, your eyes adjusting to the bright morning sun. The bailey is the castle's main workspace, a broad, packed earth enclosure bustling with activity. You see the stables, where grooms are leading powerful horses out into the yard. You see the Fletcher's workshop, its door open, revealing bundles of arrow shafts. And you hear that same rhythmic clang, clang of the blacksmith's hammer from this morning, but now you can see him, his muscular form silhouetted against the fiery glow of his forge as he reshapes a piece of armor. But the center of the yard is dominated by a different kind of work. This is the training ground, the castle's open-air gymnasium and military academy. You find a seat on the stone steps leading up to the ramparts, a safe distance from the activity, and you simply watch. What you are witnessing is the long, arduous process of forging a warrior. Your eyes are first drawn to the youngest participants. A dozen boys, some as young as 7 or 8, are being drilled by a stern man-at-arms. This is the first stage in the journey to knighthood. They are pages, sent from their own noble families to learn the rudiments of service and combat. Right now, they practice with small wooden swords and shields, learning basic footwork and how to hold a defensive stance. It looks almost like a game, but the unsmiling instructor and the determined, sweaty faces of the boys tell you otherwise. This is the beginning of a lifelong education in violence, a mainstream historical fact of noble life that started almost as soon as a boy could walk. Further out in the yard, the training gets considerably more serious. A squire, a young man of about 17, thunders past on a massive warhorse. He's aiming a heavy, blunted lance at a strange-looking device called a quinton. It's a thick post with a pivoted crossbar. On one end of the bar is a shield, his target. On the other end is a heavy sandbag. The goal is to strike the shield squarely with the lance while riding at speed. The squire's aim is slightly off. He hits the edge of the shield, and the crossbar whips around with surprising speed. He isn't quick enough to duck, and the sandbag catches him squarely in the back with a dull thump, nearly knocking him from his saddle. A roar of mocking laughter goes up from his fellow squires, and the master-at-arms, a man with a face like a knotted piece of wood, unleashes a string of creative insults regarding the boy's parentage and horsemanship. It's a painful but effective feedback mechanism. Not far from the quinton, 2 other squires are engaged in sword practice. They wear thick, padded leather jerkins called gambesons and simple steel helmets that cover most of their faces. They are fighting with blunted swords, but the weight is real. This is not the elegant, nimble swordplay of your imagination. This is a brutal, exhausting battering match. Each swing is a full-body effort, designed to bludgeon through an opponent's defense. The air rings with the loud clang of steel on steel. They grunt with effort, circling each other, their feet kicking up clouds of dust. One squire leaves himself open for a moment, and the other brings his sword down in a powerful blow against his opponent's helmet. The sound is a dull, sickening gong. The boy stumbles back, shaking his head to clear it. There are no timeouts. There are no referees. There is only the watchful eye of the master-at-arms, who yells at him to keep his shield up. You see a knight instructing a squire on different stances. He mentions the Fool's Guard, a seemingly open and inviting posture designed to bait an opponent into a foolish attack. It's a quirky and wonderful name, a small tidbit of the technical language of combat, a reminder that amidst the brutality, there is a science to this deadly art. This whole violent curriculum is overseen by the master-at-arms. He is a veteran of a dozen campaigns, his body a roadmap of old scars. He moves with a purpose, a coiled energy that betrays his age. He'll stop to physically wrench a boy's arm into the correct position for a shield block, then demonstrate a disarming technique on a squire with startling speed, leaving the boy on his back in the dust. He carries a long, thin wooden rod, which he uses to deliver sharp, stinging raps to the legs or backsides of anyone whose attention wanders. He is the living embodiment of the castle's purpose. While the path to knighthood was highly ritualized, it was not the only form of training here. Over by the far wall, a group of archers practices at the butts, firing arrow after arrow into stout targets stuffed with straw. Their training is just as rigorous but far less formal. Historians debate how much structured training a common man-at-arms received compared to the highly ritualized path of a knight, but watching the archers, you can see their skill is a product of relentless, lifelong practice, just as vital to the castle's defense as any knight's lance. You watch all this and realize that nothing here is for show. This is not a sport. It is preparation for the terrifying reality of a medieval battlefield. Every exhausting drill is designed to build the muscle and instinct needed to survive in a chaotic scrum of screaming men, terrified horses, and sharp, heavy steel. The weight of the armor, the imprecision of the weapons, the ever-present chance of a gruesome, painful injury, or worse, is the reality they are training for. This isn't about honor or glory, it's about survival. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, the relentless work continues. The bailey is alive with the sounds of effort and the sights of disciplined violence. The peace within the castle walls, the quiet industry of the solar, and the hot productivity of the kitchens are all underwritten by the sweat and pain you see here in this yard. This is the castle's iron core, its guarantee against the outside world. You turn away from the dusty, chaotic arena of the training yard, the rhythmic clang of practice swords fading behind you. The relentless, grinding preparation for war leaves a faint hum in your bones, and you seek a different kind of quiet. You cross the bailey, heading back towards the main keep, and find a small, arched doorway tucked away at the base of a tower. The carving above the door is simple but elegant, a lamb holding a cross. This is the entrance to the castle chapel. You push open the heavy, iron-strapped door, and as it closes behind you with a soft, definitive thud, the world changes completely. The noise of the castle vanishes, swallowed by the thick stone walls. The silence that greets you is profound, a living presence in the cool, still air. It's a silence scented with the faint, sweet smell of old incense, beeswax, and the clean, mineral scent of cold stone. After the bright, harsh sun of the bailey, the light in here is dim, serene, and colorful. It filters through a tall, narrow stained glass window behind the altar, painting shifting jewels of deep blue, ruby red, and emerald green onto the gray stone floor. The chapel is not large, but its ceiling is high and vaulted, ribbed with stone arches that draw your eyes upward, designed to lift your thoughts from the mundane to the divine. The floor is made of smooth, worn flagstones. At the far end stands a simple stone altar, draped with a fine white linen cloth, upon which sit two polished brass candlesticks and a large, leather-bound book. This is the spiritual heart of the castle, a space set apart from the daily struggles for survival, status, and sustenance. You notice that the chapel is divided. About 2/3 of the way down its length, an ornate screen of dark, carved wood stretches from wall to wall, separating the main body of the chapel, the nave, from the area around the altar, the chancel. This is a rood screen, a feature in many medieval churches. Its purpose was to create a sense of mystery, partially veiling the most sacred parts of the service from the eyes of the laity. It's a physical barrier that reinforces the spiritual one between the ordinary person and the holy mysteries being performed by the priest. A few figures are already here, seeking a moment of peace before the midday prayer. You recognize the lady of the castle, from the solar. She is not in a grand private box, but she has a designated, cushioned kneeler near the front, just outside the rood screen, a subtle but clear indicator of her status. A few household servants stand silently at the back, their heads bowed, their rough work clothes a stark contrast to the lady's fine gown. Even in the house of God, the social hierarchy of the castle is quietly maintained. The castle chaplain emerges from a small door beside the altar. He is a thin man with a scholarly face, and he moves with a quiet sense of purpose. He is a pivotal figure in the castle, more than just a priest. As one of the few guaranteed literate men, he often serves as the Lord's secretary, the children's tutor, and a trusted advisor. He bows his head to the altar, lights the 2 candles, their small flames steady in the draft-free air, and opens the large book. He begins the service for sext, the midday hour of prayer. He doesn't speak, he chants, his voice a low, resonant monotone that fills the quiet space. The words are in Latin. This is a crucial historical fact of medieval worship. The language of the church was not the language of the people. For you, and for the servants standing at the back, the words are incomprehensible, a stream of beautiful but meaningless sounds. The service is not something to be intellectually understood, but to be experienced. It's a sensory event, the hypnotic drone of the chant, the flickering candlelight, the smell of the beeswax, the sight of the priest's formal, practiced rituals. This mystery reinforced the chaplain's role as a vital intermediary, the one person who could speak to God in his own language on your behalf. As you stand against a cold stone pillar, you find yourself wondering about the nature of the faith of those around you. Historians and theologians debate the depth of personal, individual belief versus the communal, ritualistic observance for the average medieval person. Is the servant at the back, his eyes gazing at the vaulted ceiling, lost in a moment of profound spiritual connection? Or is he simply fulfilling a mandatory part of his daily routine, his thoughts on the meal to come or the work that awaits him? It's impossible to know. Faith was not an optional, private matter, it was woven into the very fabric of existence. The church calendar dictated the rhythm of the entire year, with its cycle of feasts and fasts. A sudden illness was a test from God, a good harvest was a blessing, and a victory in battle was a sign of divine favor. This chapel is the anchor point for that entire worldview. The chaplain's chant rises and falls. The colored light from the window creeps slowly across the floor. In this moment, the grime of the kitchens, the tensions of the solar, and the brutal noise of the training yard feel a world away. This space is an oasis of peace, a place to be still. The monotonous, incomprehensible chanting has a profoundly calming effect, washing over you, asking nothing but your quiet presence. It's the perfect environment for a mind to slowly let go of its worries and drift. The short service concludes. The chaplain murmurs a final amen, the sound echoing briefly in the high ceiling. He extinguishes the candles, the wicks hissing softly, and disappears back through the small door. The lady rises gracefully from her kneeler and departs, her ladies-in-waiting following silently. You linger for another moment, alone in the sudden silence, the ghost of the chant still seeming to hang in the cool, heavy air. Then, you two turn and push open the heavy door, stepping back out into the world of noise, work, and time. Stepping out from the chapel's profound quiet, the sounds of the castle Bailey rush back in, but they seem different to you now. After the serene, otherworldly chants, the noises of daily labor sound more distinct, more purposeful. The rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer is no longer just a background noise, it's a beat that you feel drawn to. You leave the sacred space behind and walk toward the profane, practical world of the unseen workforce that keeps this stone fortress alive. You find yourself standing near the blacksmith's forge, the same one you heard at the crack of dawn. The heat rolling out of his open-fronted workshop is intense, a dry, scorching heat that rivals the kitchen's damp inferno. The smith, a man with arms as thick as small tree trunks, is a study in focused power. He is bare to the waist despite the morning chill, his torso slick with sweat and streaked with soot. Using a long pair of tongs, he pulls a glowing, orange-yellow bar of iron from the heart of the roaring coal fire. With swift, practiced movements, he places it on the anvil and begins to hammer. The sound is deafening up close, a sharp, ringing blow that seems to shake the air. He is not just hitting the metal, he is shaping it, turning a simple bar into a complex hinge for a new gate, each blow precise and calculated. Beside the forge, a trough of water steams, and when he plunges the finished hinge into it, it erupts in a furious, hissing cloud. This man and his apprentices make everything from the nails holding the castle together to the shoes on its horses to the arrowheads for its archers. He is the castle's master mechanic, a vital and highly respected craftsman. You move on, seeking a quieter corner of the bailey, and find the Fletcher's workshop. The air here smells clean and woody, a pleasant mix of wood shavings and a sharp, animal scent of hot glue. Inside, a man with fine, delicate hands is meticulously crafting arrows. It's a process of quiet precision. You watch as he takes a long, thin shaft of ash wood, sights down its length to ensure it's perfectly straight, and then carefully carves a small notch, the nock, into one end. His apprentice sits nearby, trimming goose feathers. This is a fascinatingly quirky tidbit of medieval craft. Goose feathers were the gold standard for fletching, and it was believed that feathers from the right wing of the goose would make the arrow spin to the right, while feathers from the left wing would make it spin left. Consistency was key. The Fletcher glues 3 of these perfectly matched feathers to the shaft, his movements swift and sure. He is making the ammunition you saw the archers practicing with earlier, his silent, painstaking work the necessary prelude to their noisy, deadly skill. This entire castle is a self-sufficient community, designed to withstand a siege for months if necessary. That mainstream historical fact is evident everywhere you look. It's a walled village with all the trades it needs to survive. The work is not always as skilled as the Smiths or the Fletchers, but it is no less essential. You wander over to the castle well, where you find one of the harshest and most vital workplaces, the laundry. Several women, the laundresses, are hard at work. Their sleeves are rolled up past their elbows, their arms red from the work. They stand over large wooden tubs filled with steaming water, laboriously scrubbing the castle's linen. The smell of lye, a harsh chemical used for soap, is sharp in the air. They scrub the clothes on wooden boards, then lay them on a flat stone and beat them with heavy wooden paddles to force the dirt out. It's back-breaking, relentless work. They wash everything from the fine linen altar cloth you saw in the chapel to the sweat-soaked undertunics of the knights from the training yard. Theirs is a constant battle against the grime and filth of several hundred people living in close quarters. As you watch these craftsmen and laborers, you realize you are seeing a social structure as rigid as the one in the Great Hall. A blacksmith's son would almost certainly become a blacksmith, learning the trade at his father's side from the moment he could safely hold a hammer. Historians disagree on the degree of social mobility available to skilled craftsmen. Was a talented Fletcher's son destined to remain a Fletcher, or could he, through some feat of arms or stroke of luck, aspire to a different role? For most, their future was as set as the stones in the castle walls, their lives dedicated to a single, essential craft. You see other glimpses of this world of work all around you. In the stables, a groom patiently curries a massive warhorse, his soft murmurs calming the powerful animal. Near the storehouses, a carpenter is repairing a broken cartwheel, his saw and chisel moving with easy familiarity. In a shaded nook, a chandler is making candles, endlessly dipping wicks into a vat of hot tallow or more precious beeswax, creating the very light that will push back the darkness in the lady's solar and the lord's chamber tonight. And then there are the servants whose work has no specific workshop. The men and women you see scurrying across the bailey with buckets of water, bundles of firewood, or baskets of vegetables. The ones who muck out the gardrobes, who sweep the old rushes from the floors and lay down new ones, who carry and fetch and clean from sunup to sundown. They are the unseen majority, the true engine of the castle. Without their endless, thankless labor, the entire magnificent structure would grind to a halt in a matter of days, buried under its own filth and dysfunction. You've seen the nobles, the knights, and the clergy. But here, amidst the workshops and the workspaces of the bailey, you've seen the castle's foundation. It is built not just on stone, but on the tireless, constant, and uncelebrated work of the dozens of people whose names will never be recorded in any history, but without whom there would be no history to write. A horn sounds from the battlements, its long, clear note echoing across the entire castle. It is the signal for the main meal of the day. From the dusty training yard, the noisy workshops, and the quiet solar, everyone begins to converge once more on the Great Hall. The morning's work is done. Now, it is time for dinner. You file back into the vast hall along with everyone else. The atmosphere is noticeably different from the hurried breakfast this morning. The trestle tables have been laid with more care, and a long, if somewhat coarse, runner of cloth now covers their center. More torches have been lit, and the room feels brighter, warmer, and more expectant. You take your usual seat on the backless bench. A trumpet fanfare cuts through the chatter, and all heads turn towards the main entrance. The lord and lady of the castle enter, followed by their family and any honored guests. They move in a slow, stately procession to the raised dais, a daily parade reinforcing their elevated status. Before they sit, servants approach with a silver basin and ewer. They pour warm, rose-scented water over the lord and lady's hands, which are then dried on a clean linen towel. This ritual hand-washing is both practical and symbolic. Once they are seated, the chaplain steps forward and says a lengthy grace in Latin, his voice filling the now silent hall. At the Lord's place on the high table sits a magnificent and peculiar object. It's an an intricate, ship-shaped container crafted from silver. This is not just decoration, it's a high-status personal caddy, a quirky and ostentatious tidbit of medieval life. It holds the Lord's personal salt, his most precious spices, and perhaps his own knife and spoon, keeping them secure and marking his place as the most important person in the room. With the formalities complete, the meal begins. And it is a spectacle. This is the main meal of the day, dinner, and it is a long, multi-course affair designed to display the wealth of the castle. An army of servers emerges from the direction of the kitchens, bringing the first course, or mess. Platters are laid out for every group of 4 or 6 diners to share. You see a thick, spiced vegetable soup, followed by platters of boiled beef with a sharp mustard sauce, and a simple dish of salted fish. And, of course, there is the bread, that ever-present indicator of status, from the fine white manchet on the dais to the coarse loaf on your own table. As the first course is cleared away, the entertainment begins. From a gallery high up on the wall, a group of minstrels begins to play a lively tune on lutes, pipes, and a small drum. The music provides a festive backdrop to the meal, a welcome distraction from the serious business of chewing. Then comes the second course, the main event. The servers enter with a flourish, presenting the grand roasts. You see the whole roasted pig you witnessed on the spit in the kitchens, its skin a perfect, crisp, golden brown, an apple now firmly lodged in its mouth. There are roasted geese, platters of venison, and for the high table, a magnificent swan, its feathers reattached after cooking to make it look as if it might fly off the plate. The carver, a high-ranking squire, steps forward with a long, sharp knife and expertly begins to dissect the roasts with practiced skill, serving the best cuts to the lord and lady. The famous bird pie makes its appearance. When the lord cuts the crust, a flurry of starlings bursts forth, fluttering up into the smoky rafters to the delight and applause of the diners. It's pure theater. The dishes are complex and heavily spiced. Food historians debate the exact flavor profiles of many medieval dishes, as recipes often omitted precise quantities, leaving much to the cook's discretion. The flavors you taste are a riot of sweet, sour, and savory, often in the same dish: meat cooked with fruit, wine, and a heavy dose of ginger, cinnamon, and cloves. You eat, as before, with your hands and a knife. But the rules of etiquette are even more important now. You must wipe your mouth on your napkin, a shared piece of cloth, before you drink from the communal cup, so as not to leave a greasy film on the rim. You take your portion from the shared platter without greedily picking through it for the best bits. Any bones are not to be thrown on the floor for the dogs, but placed neatly on a voiding plate for later disposal. It's a surprisingly civilized process, for all its lack of forks. Between the main courses, the subtleties are paraded through the hall. The sculpted lion made of meat paste, a castle molded from almond sugar. They are not meant to be eaten, merely admired as a testament to the skill of the cook and the wealth of the lord. At the same time, the castle jester, a man in a colorful motley costume with bells on his hat, moves among the lower tables. He tells crude jokes, performs clumsy acrobatics, and makes pointed, witty insults about the guests, one of the few people in the castle allowed to speak truth to power, as long as it's funny. The meal stretches on, a slow and deliberate performance of consumption. It can last for 2 or 3 hours. It is not just about feeding the household, it is the primary social event of the day. Business is discussed, alliances are subtly negotiated, and the castle's community is brought together. As the final savory dishes are cleared, servants bring bowls of fruit, nuts, and small cakes, along with pitchers of sweet, spiced wine for the high table. Finally, the lord rises from his seat. This is the signal. The meal is over. The minstrels play a final chord. The jester gives a final bow. You and hundreds of others rise from the benches, your stomach full, your head slightly swimming from the food and the noise. The spectacle is finished. You've just participated in a powerful daily ritual that was about so much more than food. It was about order, power, and the carefully orchestrated performance of life in a medieval castle. The great dinner is over. The trestle tables in the hall are being cleared away by servants, the dogs happily snapping up any overlooked morsels. For the castle's workforce, the cooks, the smiths, the laundresses, the afternoon is simply a continuation of their labor. But for the nobility, the day now enters a different phase. With bellies full and the day's formal duties largely concluded, the afternoon is a space to be filled with leisure. You find your way back to the ladies' solar. The room has transformed. The desks and account books from the morning have been put away. The focused, business-like atmosphere has been replaced by one of relaxed recreation. In one corner, near the warm hearth, two knights are hunched over a game of chess. The board is beautifully inlaid with ivory and dark wood, the pieces intricately carved. They play in silence, their concentration absolute, a quiet battle of wits that mirrors the larger-scale strategies of war. Another small group is playing tables, a game of dice and counters that is a clear ancestor of backgammon, the clatter of their dice on the wooden board a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the crackling fire. The lady of the castle sits with her companions, their tapestry work from this morning continuing, but at a more languid pace. One of the ladies-in-waiting is reading aloud from a heavy, bound manuscript. Her voice is soft and clear as she recites a tale of chivalric romance, a story of brave knights and their impossible love for beautiful queens. It's the medieval equivalent of a soap opera, and her audience is captivated. The minstrels from dinner are here too, quietly strumming lutes, providing a soft, unobtrusive soundtrack to the afternoon's gentle pastimes. But this indoor quiet is suddenly pierced by a series of excited yaps and a long, clear call from a hunting horn in the bailey below. The Lord has decided the weather is too fine to remain indoors. It is time for the hunt. For the medieval nobility, hunting was not just a hobby, it was a passion, a science, and a vital part of their identity. A small party first assembles for falconry, a sport favored for its elegance and skill. The Lord's chief falconer, a man of immense knowledge and patience, carries several hooded hawks on a padded frame. The lady of the castle decides to join this group, pulling on fine leather gloves. They ride out into the open fields beyond the castle walls. You watch as the falconer removes the hood from a magnificent peregrine falcon. The bird's sharp eyes take in the world in an instant. At a word from the lady, the falconer unfastens its jesses and tosses it into the air. It rises with powerful wing beats, circling high above, a dark speck against the blue sky. The party waits, silent and watchful. Then, the falcon spots its prey, perhaps a duck near a small pond. It folds its wings and dives, a feathered missile dropping from the sky at incredible speed. The strike is too swift to see clearly. A moment later, the falcon is on the ground with its prize, and at a call from the falconer, it will eventually return to his gloved fist, the hunt a quiet, deadly, and graceful success. At the same time, a much larger, noisier, and more chaotic expedition is assembling in the bailey for the great hunt. The kennel master releases the hounds, a yelping, baying torrent of energy. Grooms lead out the powerful hunting horses, or destriers, the same kind used in battle. The lord and his knights are dressed in practical hunting gear. This is the ultimate aristocratic sport, and it was a right reserved strictly for them. The vast forests surrounding the castle were the lord's personal larder and playground. A mainstream historical fact of the era is that poaching, a peasant hunting in the lord's woods to feed his family, was a crime punished with extreme severity, from mutilation to hanging. These animals were for the lord's pleasure alone. As the party rides into the forest, the chief huntsman begins to play his horn. This is another quirky tidbit of noble life. The hunt was governed by a complex language of horn calls known as venery. A specific sequence of notes would signal that a stag had been sighted, another would call the hounds back, another would announce the kill. It was an entire musical vocabulary dedicated to the chase. Soon, the hounds pick up a scent, and their baying deepens with excitement. The hunt is on. The forest erupts in a chaos of sound and motion, the thunder of hooves, the crashing through underbrush, the relentless calling of the hounds, and the directing calls of the horn. Historians debate the primary motivation for the aristocratic hunt. Was it truly for sport, for practical food acquisition, or was it overwhelmingly a form of ritualized military training? As you watch the lord gallop at full speed through the dense woods, expertly guiding his horse while tracking his prey, you realize the answer is all three. It is a thrilling, dangerous, high-speed chase that hones every skill a knight needs for battle, horsemanship, tracking, courage, and the use of a weapon at speed. After a long chase, the hounds corner a magnificent stag. The hunting party closes in, forming a circle. The kill itself is a ritual. The lord dismounts and, with a specialized hunting spear, makes the final, fatal strike. The horns sound a triumphant, mournful call to signal the end of the hunt. The stag is then carefully unmade, or butchered, on the spot, with specific cuts of meat reserved for the lord, the honored guests, and the hounds who performed well. The rest will be carried back to the castle kitchens, a hard-won prize that will soon become another magnificent feast. The sun begins to dip towards the horizon as the hunters return, triumphant and exhausted. The afternoon's leisure is at an end. Whether spent in the quiet, strategic contemplation of a chess game or the wild, exhilarating danger of the hunt, these pastimes were a reflection of the noble class itself, tactical, dominant, and always playing a game for the highest of stakes. The triumphant clamor of the returning hunt fades, and a new, more sober rhythm begins to settle over the castle. The sun is low in the sky, painting the clouds in fiery shades of orange and purple. The day's leisure is done, and the castle begins to turn inward, preparing for the long, dark hours of the night. Drawn by a need to see the world from a different perspective, you find a narrow stairwell in the corner of the bailey and begin to climb. The stone steps are steep and worn, spiraling tightly upwards inside the cold, dark tower. After several turns, you emerge through a low doorway and onto the battlements. The change is breathtaking. You are standing on the wall walk, a narrow stone path running along the top of the castle's massive curtain wall. The wind is stronger up here, a constant, cool presence that carries the scent of distant wood smoke and damp earth. On one side is the familiar, bustling world of the castle courtyard. On the other is a dizzying drop to the ground below and a panoramic, godlike view of the surrounding countryside, now bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. You see the forest where the hunt took place, now falling into shadow. You see the small village of wattle and daub huts clustered near the castle's base, thin plumes of smoke rising from their chimneys as evening meals are prepared. From this height, the world seems ordered, peaceful, and under your control. The wall itself is a marvel of defensive engineering. It is thick and solid, and as you walk, you notice the regular pattern of small, square holes in the stonework. These are putlog holes, a quirky, permanent reminder of the castle's construction, left behind by the wooden scaffolding the builders used centuries ago. You are not alone up here. This is the domain of the castle guards. You see a pair of them a short distance away, leaning against the solid stone segments of the wall, the merlins. They are not the shining knights of song and story. They are professional men-at-arms, clad in practical, functional gear, a padded gambeson, a simple steel helmet, and a long, menacing polearm resting beside them. They are graduates of the brutal training you witnessed in the bailey, their purpose now shifted from practice to deadly earnest. They give you a brief, incurious nod and turn their gaze back to the horizon. This is the evening watch, a duty as old as castles themselves. A core historical fact of garrison life was the watch system, a relentless cycle of duty that ensured the walls were manned at all hours of the day and night, in any weather. You fall into a slow pace behind the guards as they begin their patrol. Their job is one of monumental boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. They walk, they stop at a crenelle, the gap in the wall, and they scan the landscape. Their eyes are trained to notice anything out of place, a flicker of movement in a distant copse of trees, a plume of dust on the road that doesn't belong, the glint of reflected light that could be a spy's looking glass or a hostile helmet. From this vantage point, you can truly appreciate the castle's defensive design. You walk over a section of the wall that juts out above the main gate and see the grated holes in the floor between your feet, murder holes, placed to allow defenders to drop rocks, hot sand, or boiling water on anyone trying to break down the gate below. You see how the towers are positioned to provide flanking fire, ensuring there are no blind spots where an enemy could hide from the archer's arrows. The entire structure is a machine built for one purpose, to repel attackers. It is a lesson in military architecture laid out before you. As twilight deepens, the guard's task becomes more difficult. The familiar landscape dissolves into a mass of uncertain shapes and shadows. Was that the wind rustling the leaves, or the sound of someone creeping through the undergrowth? Is that the shape of a boulder, or a man crouching in the dusk? The psychological tension is immense. Military historians debate the effectiveness and frequency of full-scale nighttime assaults on major castles, but the constant, vigilant presence of a night watch suggests the threat was considered perpetually real and credible. For the men on duty, every shadow holds a potential enemy. Another pair of guards arrives on the walkway, their footsteps sure and steady in the growing darkness. The changing of the guard is a simple, understated affair. There is no ceremony, just a few mumbled words, a quiet report that all is quiet on the western wall. The first pair shoulders their weapons and trudges wearily towards the stairs, their watch over. The new pair takes their place, their fresh eyes scanning the now dark landscape. The watch is seamless, unbroken. The first stars begin to appear in the deep velvet of the sky. The wind feels colder now. You stand by a crenelle, feeling the rough, cold stone under your hands, and look out into the darkness. The world outside the walls has disappeared, becoming a vast, unknown space. Up here, on the lonely, windswept battlements, the castle feels less like the bustling, multifaceted community you've explored today and more like what it fundamentally is, a ship of stone on a dangerous sea, its safety entrusted to the tired, vigilant eyes of the few men brave or duty-bound enough to stand the watch. You descend from the cold, clean air of the battlements, leaving the vast, open sky behind. Back within the stone arteries of the castle, the air is immediately different. It's warmer, stiller, and thick with the accumulated smells of life. After the clean emptiness of the windy heights, your senses are suddenly on high alert, and you begin to notice the less than glamorous side of castle life, a reality of grit and grime that underpins the grand spectacle. It's time to confront the ever-present squalor. The call of nature leads you in search of the necessary facilities. There are no well-lit, private bathrooms here. Instead, you are directed to a garderobe. It is a small, cramped stone closet, built into the thickness of the massive outer wall. Inside, there is a rough wooden plank with a hole in it, positioned over a chute that opens directly to the air outside. As you enter, two things hit you at once: the smell, a pungent wave of ammonia and waste that catches in the back of your throat, and the surprisingly strong, cold draft coming up from the hole. This is the castle's toilet, a masterpiece of simple, if unsubtle, engineering. The mainstream historical fact is that this chute simply emptied down the exterior wall, depositing its contents into the moat or a cesspit at the base of the castle. It was a system that efficiently removed waste from your immediate vicinity, while making the area at the bottom of the wall profoundly unpleasant. As you contemplate this system, you might spare a thought for one of the most unfortunate but essential workers in this ecosystem, the gong farmer. This was the quirky, historical term for the man tasked with the nocturnal job of emptying the cesspits. It was foul, dangerous work, the fumes could be lethal, and they were often social outcasts, only permitted to work at night. Yet, without their thankless labor, the castle would quickly become uninhabitable, choked by its own refuse. Stepping out of the drafty garderobe, your senses are now attuned to a different frequency. You start to notice the background smells you had previously filtered out. The ever-present scent of wood smoke clings to every tapestry and timber. The smell of unwashed bodies, of damp wool and stale sweat, is a constant undertone in crowded spaces. The air is thick with the ghosts of 1,000 meals, the faint, greasy scent of roasted meat and spilled ale that has soaked into the very wood of the tables and the rushes on the floor. Ah, the rushes. You look down at them with new eyes. When you first arrived, they seemed like a rustic, charming form of carpeting. Now, you see them for what they are, a single-use, slowly composting floor covering. In a quiet corner of a passageway, you see a thick, trodden mat of them that has clearly not been changed in some time. You can see old, gnawed bones from a past meal, dirt, animal droppings, and other unidentifiable bits of muck. While often portrayed as universally filthy, historians debate the degree to which medieval people were oblivious to their squalid conditions. The fact that sweet-smelling herbs like meadowsweet and lavender were often mixed in with the rushes suggests a clear desire to combat the stench, a constant, losing battle against the entropy of daily life. What about personal hygiene? The ritual of washing hands before a meal, as you saw at dinner, was incredibly important, a small but significant act of cleanliness in a dirty world. A full-body bath, however, was another matter entirely. It was a rare, laborious luxury. It involved servants hauling dozens of buckets of water to be heated over a fire, then poured into a large wooden tub that had been brought into your private chamber. The lord and lady might enjoy such a luxury with some regularity, but the water would often be reused, with people of descending social status bathing one after another in the same cooling, murky water. For most of the castle's inhabitants, a quick splash of cold water on the face and hands in the morning was the beginning and end of their daily washing. This lack of sanitation, combined with the close quarters, made the castle a paradise for pests. You feel a sudden itch on your ankle and realize you are not alone in your clothes. Fleas and lice were constant companions, an accepted part of life. At night, You can hear the faint scurrying of rats behind the tapestries. The many cats you see slinking around the castle are not just lazy pets, they are a vital part of the pest control system, engaged in a perpetual, silent war against the rodents that would otherwise overrun the storehouses. And where did all the other waste go? The slop from the kitchens, the ashes from the hearths, the broken pottery, the old, soiled rushes when they were finally swept up? Much of it was simply dumped. The beautiful, reflective moat you might picture in a fairy tale was more often a stagnant, stinking sewer, a dumping ground for both human waste from the guardrobes and general castle refuse. It was an effective barrier against attackers, but one that came with its own potent form of biological warfare for anyone living downwind. The grand, imposing image of the castle now seems irrevocably altered. Its soaring stone walls and noble finery are a thin, fragile veneer over a world that was teeming, fragrant, and, by our standards, profoundly dirty. You realize that the daily struggle here was not just about politics or warfare, but also about a constant, grinding battle against the forces of decay, smell, and filth. With the stark realities of the castle's sanitation, or lack thereof, fresh in your mind, an unnerving thought follows quite naturally. Where there is dirt, there is disease. In a world without germ theory, antibiotics, or a public health system, sickness was a constant and terrifying presence, a mysterious force that could lay low the strongest knight or the most powerful lord with little warning. How, then, did the inhabitants of this stone fortress confront the inevitable reality of illness? You recall the scene from yesterday morning in the lady's solar, the small, feverish child brought before her. The lady's calm, herbal-based response was the first and most common line of defense. Her knowledge was practical, passed down through generations. Tucked away in a sunny corner of the castle's garden was a well-tended plot of herbs, a living pharmacy. There, she could find chamomile and lavender to soothe and promote sleep, yarrow to reduce a fever, and willow bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, to ease pain. But her understanding of why these remedies worked was rooted in a completely different medical universe. The guiding principle of all medieval medicine was the theory of the four humors, a concept inherited from the ancient Greeks. This is the central historical fact you must understand. It was believed the body was composed of four essential fluids: blood, hot and wet; phlegm, cold and wet; yellow bile, hot and dry; and black bile, cold and dry. A healthy person had these four humors in perfect balance. Sickness, therefore, was simply an imbalance, too much of one humor, not enough of another. Every treatment, from the simplest herbal tea to the most drastic intervention, was aimed at restoring this delicate equilibrium. For more serious ailments, or for procedures deemed beneath the lady, the castle would rely on its barber surgeon. You see his small workshop in the bailey, often identifiable by a striped pole outside. He is a craftsman, not a scholar. You might see him giving a guard a rough haircut one moment, and then, for his next client, he pulls out a fearsome-looking pair of tongs to extract a rotten tooth. His most common medical procedure, however, was bloodletting. You see a squire who has been suffering from headaches and a fever, a clear sign, in their view, of an excess of the blood humor. He sits on a stool, and the barber surgeon ties a cloth tightly around his upper arm. The veins bulge. With a small, sharp knife called a lancet, the barber makes a quick, practiced nick in the vein. A stream of dark, thick blood flows into a small metal bowl. The goal was to remove the surplus humor to restore balance. For localized pains, leeches might be applied to achieve the same effect on a smaller scale. To our eyes, it seems barbaric. To them, it was a logical, standard, and essential medical treatment for a huge range of illnesses. If the Lord himself fell gravely ill, a university-trained physician might be summoned, at great expense. This man's approach would be more cerebral. He would likely not touch the patient. Instead, he would begin by asking for a flask of the Lord's urine, which he would hold up to the light, examining its color, clarity, and sediment against a detailed chart. He would then consult an almanac. This is where a quirky and fascinating tidbit of medical history comes in: the zodiac man. This was a diagram showing a human body with each part linked to a sign of the zodiac. A physician would use this, along with the patient's birth chart, to determine the most astrologically auspicious time to attempt a treatment. Administering a cure for a headache when the moon was in Aries, which governed the head, could be disastrous. It was a complex system of medicine, astrology, and cosmology, all rolled into one. Of course, no matter the practitioner, faith was an inseparable part of the healing process. The chaplain would be called to the bedside of any sick person of note, to pray for their recovery and hear their confession. Sickness was often viewed as a divine punishment for sin or a trial to test one's faith. As such, a spiritual cure was just as important as a physical one. Certain saints were patrons of specific ailments, and prayers would be directed to them, or a donation made to the chapel in their name. This reliance on faith and often ineffective treatments leads to a fascinating question. Historians and medical anthropologists debate whether the placebo effect, generated by the powerful, combined faith in both priest and physician, was one of the most effective tools in the medieval medical arsenal. When a doctor confidently declared that a foul-tasting potion, administered on an astrologically perfect day, would work, did the patient's sheer belief in the cure do more than the ingredients themselves? Life here was fragile. A simple cut from a kitchen knife could fester and lead to a painful death from infection. A winter cough could turn into a fatal case of pneumonia. Without an understanding of bacteria, viruses, or proper sanitation, every day was a gamble. The air in a sick room was heavy with the smell of sickness itself, mixed with the sense of herbal poultices and the ever-present fear. Surviving an illness was a testament not just to the body's resilience, but to luck, and in their minds, to the will of God. It was a world where medicine was a complex tapestry of folk wisdom, ancient theory, and unwavering faith. As the last vestiges of color drain from the western sky, a tangible change comes over the castle. The frantic energy of the day, the purposeful labor of the afternoon, all of it begins to wind down. A sense of closure, of turning inward, settles over the stone fortress. The air grows colder, and the shadows in the courtyards deepen from gray to black. It is the evening retreat, a time for the castle to pull up its drawbridge on the world. You find your way back to the great hall, but it is a different place from the one that hosted the boisterous midday dinner. Only a few torches are lit, casting long, dancing shadows up the stone walls. The hall is quiet, sparsely populated. Many of the higher-ranking inhabitants have opted to take their evening meal in the privacy of their chambers. For those who remain, the meal is simple, a light supper designed to carry you through the night. Servers move quietly, bringing out platters of what is essentially leftovers from dinner, slices of cold roasted meat, wedges of hard cheese, and dense loaves of dark bread. You take your share, eating slowly in the companionable quiet. People are tired. The conversations are muted, the sounds of a community weary from a long day's work. As you finish your simple meal, you hear a series of sharp commands shouted from the direction of the main gatehouse. Drawn by the sound, you witness the most important ritual of the evening. A team of guards is gathered at the massive, iron-strapped oak gates. At their sergeant's command, they put their shoulders to the wood and begin to push. The gates groan in protest, the sound of immense weight moving on huge iron hinges echoes across the bailey. With a final, reverberating thud, the two halves meet, plunging the courtyard into near-complete darkness. A heavy wooden bar, as thick as a man's thigh, is lifted by two men and dropped into iron brackets, securing the entrance. The castle is now closed, but the process is not yet complete. You hear the rattling of heavy chains from within the gatehouse. Slowly, with a dreadful grinding sound, the portcullis begins its descent. This iron grille, with its row of menacing spikes at the bottom, slides down its stone grooves, a final, emphatic statement of security. The sight of it slamming into the stone threshold is the castle's full stop on the day. This nightly lockdown is a core historical fact of castle life. Unbarring these gates in the middle of the night would be an incredibly difficult and rare event. The castle is now sealed off from the outside world until sunrise. With the darkness now almost absolute, another group of servants begins their nightly rounds. They carry long tapers, moving through the main thoroughfares and chambers to bring light to the castle's interior. They light torches in the wall sconces of the great hall and the main corridors, their pitch-soaked heads crackling and spitting, filling the air with a resinous smoke. In the lords' and ladies' chambers, they light precious beeswax candles, which offer a cleaner, steadier light. Just how dark a castle was at night is a subject of some debate among historians. While the nobility could afford the luxury of beeswax, the cost to fully illuminate the entire fortress would have been astronomical. The reality is that these lit areas were small islands of flickering light in a vast ocean of darkness. Most of the castle, the winding stairs, the lesser corridors, the storehouses, the barracks, was simply plunged into an impenetrable black. As the servants complete their task, a bell begins to toll from the chapel tower. Its slow, steady rhythm is the sound of the curfew. This word has a fascinating origin, a quirky tidbit from the old French couvre-feu. which literally means cover fire. The bell was a signal to every household within the walls to bank their hearths, covering the embers with ash to prevent stray sparks from causing a catastrophic fire while the inhabitants slept. It was the official end of the day. At the sound of the bell, the last vestiges of public life drain away. People retreat to their sleeping quarters. The great hall empties out completely, becoming a cavernous, shadowy space inhabited only by ghosts and echoes. The castle contracts, its life force pulling back into the small, warm pockets of the solar, the barracks, and the chambers of the keep. The day's noise is replaced by the sounds of the night, the lonely cry of an owl from the woods, the whistle of the wind through the battlements, and the soft crackle of the few remaining fires. The castle is now a sealed and silent world, a fortress not just against enemies, but against the vast, empty darkness of the night. You have retreated to your chamber for the night. The heavy oak door is bolted, a solid barrier between you and the darkened corridors. A single tallow candle sputters on the wooden chest, its small, wavering flame casting enormous, dancing shadows that make the familiar room seem strange and vast. The cold, which had been a constant companion all day, seems to possess a renewed strength at night, pressing in from the stone walls, making the small pool of candlelight feel like a precious, fragile thing. Your preparations for sleep are simple. You remove your heavy woolen tunic and hose, leaving on the long linen undertunic that has been your base layer all day. This will be your nightshirt. You pull back the thick, heavy curtains of your four-poster bed, the fabric cool and slightly damp to the touch. The bed, which in the morning was a lumpy landscape to be escaped, is now the ultimate sanctuary, a small, defensible fortress of warmth and privacy. You climb in, the straw and feather-filled mattress rustling beneath you, and pull the heavy fur and wool blankets up to your chin. Finally, you reach out and draw the last curtain closed, enclosing yourself in your own small, dark, quiet world. From within your fabric tent, you lean out and carefully pinch the wick of the candle. The flame vanishes with a final, smoky sigh, plunging the room into an absolute, profound darkness. The smell of the extinguished wick is the last scent of the day. Your eyes, now useless, close. Your other senses, however, seem to expand into the quiet, and you begin to listen to the symphony of the sleeping castle. At first, there is only the sound of the wind, a low, mournful whistle as it finds its way through some unseen crack in the window shutters. It is the voice of the world outside, a reminder of the vast, empty darkness beyond these thick walls. Then, you begin to notice the sounds of the castle itself. The great stone structure is not inert, it is alive, settling under its own immense weight. You hear a deep, low groan from a timber in the ceiling, a faint creak as the stones contract in the cold. It sounds like a great beast shifting in its sleep. From further away, you hear the occasional stamp and whinny of a horse in the stables, or the lonely hoot of an owl from the battlements. Inside, closer, you hear the tiny, frantic scratching of a mouse behind the wall tapestry. And you hear the sounds of people. A distant, muffled cough from a nearby chamber. The slow, deep breathing of your personal attendant, a mainstream historical fact of high-status life being that you are rarely truly alone. They sleep on a simple pallet on the floor just outside your bed curtains, a living alarm system and a constant presence. Their soft snoring is another layer in the quiet, a sound of human warmth in the cold stone room. And above all, there is the most reassuring sound of the night. Faintly, through the stone and the wind, you can hear the soft, rhythmic tread of the guards walking the lonely watch on the battlements above. Step, step, turn. Step, step, turn. It is the sound of vigilance. The sound of safety. It is the castle's own steady, quiet heartbeat, and lulled by its rhythm, you feel your consciousness begin to dissolve, and you drift into the first sleep of the night. Hours pass. You stir, waking naturally in the dead of night. The room is still completely dark, but the quality of the quiet has changed. It is deeper now, more absolute. This was a common experience in the medieval world. This quirky historical tidbit of a first and second sleep. People would often wake for an hour in the stillness of the night, a quiet, liminal time for prayer, reflection, or intimacy, before sinking back into a second, deeper slumber. In this profound silence, every tiny sound is magnified. The scuttling of the mouse seems louder. A floorboard creaks in the room above, and your mind, half asleep, momentarily imagines a footstep. The wind catches the shutter in just the right way, and it sounds for a moment like a whisper. The extent to which genuine supernatural fears, of ghosts, demons, or evil spirits, troubled the sleep of the average castle dweller is a matter of historical debate, But in this deep, impenetrable darkness, it's easy to understand how folklore and religious texts filled the night with such terrors. The world outside your bed curtains feels ancient and unknown, but then you hear it again. Faint, but clear. Step, step, turn. The watch continues, unbroken. The sound cuts through the fearful imaginings of your half-awake mind. It is a reminder of the solid, real world of stone and steel and dutiful men that surrounds and protects you. The fear subsides, replaced by a profound sense of security. The castle is awake, even as its inhabitants sleep. It is watching over you. You pull the blankets tighter, your body already growing heavy again. Sinking back into the mattress. The sounds of the night no longer seem strange or threatening. They are just the castle breathing. The wind, the stones, the snores of your servant, the footsteps of the guard, they all blend together into a single, gentle, hypnotic lullaby. You are safe. You are warm. And you are drifting back down into the deep, dark, peaceful ocean of the second sleep. As you sink deeper and deeper into the second, dreamless sleep, your awareness detaches, drifting like a wisp of smoke from your own small chamber. It floats through the cold, silent corridors, through the vast, dark emptiness of the great hall, drawn towards the only pinprick of light left burning in the entire fortress. It is the single beeswax candle in the Lord's private solar. Here, long after the curfew bell has silenced the castle, the day is not quite over. You see the Lord himself, not in his armor or his fine dinner tunic, but in a simple, heavy robe. He is alone at his desk, the same desk where his lady managed the household this morning. The room is silent save for the low crackle of the fire's dying embers and the whisper-soft scratch of his fingernail on parchment. He looks weary, the lines around his eyes deeper in the flickering candlelight. Here, you see the man, not just the title, and you feel the immense weight he carries. This is the unseen work of power, the mainstream historical fact that a lord's duty extended far beyond the battlefield or the feasting hall. He was the chief executive, the final judge, and the lead strategist of this entire domain, and his work followed him late into the night. He is bent over the same account ledgers you saw his steward carrying, his finger tracing a column of figures, the cost of grain, the price of new steel for arrowheads, the wages for the garrison. His brow is furrowed in concentration. Beside the ledgers lies a dispatch with a broken seal. A messenger must have arrived after dark. It is a report from an ally, full of troubling news of shifting alliances to the north. The hunt, the feast, the daily routines of the castle feel a world away from the grim realities of the larger political game he must constantly play. His personal feelings are irrelevant, his response must be calculated and strong. His chaplain, who you last saw chanting in the chapel, sits patiently in a nearby chair, a quill and inkpot at the ready. The Lord, having finished his reading, begins to dictate a reply. His voice is low but clear, each word chosen with care. It is a message of subtle warning and firm resolve for his troublesome neighbor. The line between a lord's public duties and private life was almost non-existent, leading historians to debate whether they ever truly experienced a moment of off-duty respite from their immense responsibilities. Watching him now, you feel the answer is likely no. When the letter is finished, the chaplain carefully sands it dry. The Lord then takes a stick of dark red wax, melting the end in the candle's flame until a small, molten pool drips onto the folded parchment. He then takes the signet ring from his finger, a quirky, personal, and powerful tool of his office, and presses it firmly into the cooling wax, leaving his unique crest as an unbreakable, authentic seal. The letter is now an extension of his own body, his own authority. He dismisses the chaplain with a quiet word of thanks. The priest bows and disappears, leaving the Lord finally, truly alone. He rises from his desk and stretches, a weary gesture that speaks of deep fatigue. He walks to the tall window and looks out into the same impenetrable darkness that blankets your own chamber. What he sees, you can only imagine, not a peaceful, sleeping land, but a kingdom to be held, a legacy to be protected, a web of threats and duties. After a long moment, he turns from the window, walks back to his desk, and with a final, deliberate puff of air, he extinguishes the last candle. The final light in the castle is gone. The Lord, its ultimate guardian, has finally gone to seek his rest. And now, the castle is fully asleep. The image of its dark, silent towers begins to soften in your mind, the sharp stone edges blurring and fading away. The story is over, and its sounds are becoming distant echoes, a gentle murmur from a time long past. Let the memory of the cold stone walls dissolve, replaced by the feeling of your own soft pillow, your own warm blankets. There are no drafts here, No guards walking a lonely watch. There is only the deep, comforting quiet of your own room, in your own time. The great, heavy gates of the fortress are fading from your thoughts, and the heavy gates of your own slumber are swinging gently closed. All the day's duties are done. All the sights and sounds of this journey have served their purpose. There is nothing left to do now, nothing at all, except to let go. Just let your breathing be slow and steady, and allow the last vestiges of thought to drift away like smoke on the night air. The castle is gone. It is only you, here, safe and sound, sinking gently, softly, into a deep and peaceful rest. Sweet dreams.
Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh. Thì chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó không có rõ đâu, không quay lại. Không có rõ. Má xịn kìa, chứ máy này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay
chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay nó không có đỏ đâu, không quay nó không có đỏ. Nói xịn kìa chứ nói này rồi đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay nó không có đỏ đâu, không quay nó không có đỏ. Nói xịn kìa chứ nói vậy rồi đâu.
Thì chớp nhán nhán được rồi. Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay nó
chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay nó có đỏ đâu, không quay không có đỏ. Nói xịn thì nói này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán